Stop prostituting yourselves and run to the loving Father, who will embrace you with forgiveness." Reverend Bedell's voice rose above the sniffles and muffled weeping of the women crowded on trestle benches of Center Street Chapel. In the front row, Christine Pendleton clasped her hands together in her lap and inwardly wept at the depravity the women faced night after night. Even though she'd been volunteering at the chapel every Sunday for the past month, her heart hadn't stopped aching every time she came and witnessed the number of immigrant women who'd fallen into immorality. At a tug on the folds of her black-flounced skirt, she glanced down to find the grubby fingers of the toddler who'd been playing on the floor behind her, clasping the silky layers. His hands were not only filthy, but slimy. "Don't touch the fine lady!" The harsh whisper behind Christine was followed by a slap on the child's hand. The toddler whimpered and jerked away from Christine's skirt. "It's all right." Christine smiled at the young mother, who was holding a newborn babe in her bony arms. The woman didn't smile back, but instead stared at Christine with eyes that seemed to have been drained of all emotion. She gave the baby in her arms a small bounce, though the infant, wrapped in an unraveling shawl, hadn't cried a peep the entire service. While Christine wasn't accustomed to children of any size or shape, she supposed a little squalling and squirming was preferable to lethargy. The toddler on the floor peered up at her with glassy eyes. A goopy discharge from his nose curled over his top lip and had crusted on his cheeks. Christine tried not to think about the fact that the slime was now on her skirt. "Here." She released her tight grip on her handkerchief, only to find that the delicate linen was horribly wrinkled from the pressure and dampness of her hold. She shook the square, but the wrinkles remained. She held it out to the little boy anyway. His slickened fingers touched the lacy edge hesitantly. "You may have it," Christine whispered. The toddler pinched the handkerchief between his thumb and forefinger. The unspoiled white contrasted with the boy's shirt, which had probably once been white, but was now the gray of dirty dishwater. His trousers were cinched at the waist with a piece of twine and rolled up at the legs, clearly intended for a much larger child. In the white material, his feet stuck out like twigs, the soles as black as coal. "You can find happiness again," the Reverend was saying. "There is hope. There is a better life available." The boy laid the handkerchief across his lap and then began to trace the scallop pattern around the rim. Christine waited for the mother to pick up the linen and wipe the boy's nose for him, since apparently he had no inclination to do so for himself. But the young woman didn't bother to look at her child, almost as if she'd forgotten he was there. What if neither of them had ever seen a handkerchief before? At the startling thought, Christine shifted so that she was facing forward and attempted to focus on Reverend Bedell standing behind a simple pulpit. The poverty and misery of this place overwhelmed her again, as it had since the day she'd heard the Reverend speak at the Ladies' Home Missionary Society meeting. He'd spoken so passionately about the needs of the immigrants in Lower Manhattan. He described situations he'd encountered, the drunkenness, theft, and degradation that existed in what he called the infernal pit. Although he'd come to give his annual report, he ended his speech with an invitation to join in his evangelistic efforts by becoming visitors among the poor. After hearing the Reverend, Christine had been unable to think of anything else until she finally had her coachman drive her to Center Street Chapel. Of course, her visit had nothing to do with Reverend Bedell himself. Even if the other ladies had gossiped about how fine-looking the widowed pastor was, Christine didn't pay attention to that sort of drivel anymore. At 30, she'd long past resigned herself to spinsterhood. She'd buried her hopes and dreams of having a husband and children, and there was no sense in reviving them only to face disappointment.